Now, as a kid, you were drawing pictures of shoes. I read somewhere that even at 4 and 5, you started doing that. So, as a toddler, now, even the most driven of helicopter parents could not have imagined, I guess, where that love would take you.
Yeah, it wasn't until I really reached the end of high school that I knew what I'd been doing since I was a little kid was actually a job that you could get paid for. I was, as a child going through school and in high school, I was kind of steered in all different directions and really kind of found that intersection of where my interests and what I was good at kind of landed, and that was in industrial design.
I want to ask you a little bit more about that and how you balance out those things. But let's start with The Last Dance, shall we? Because I feel like most of us have been obsessed with it over the last couple of months while in ISO. But your love of Michael Jordan started a whole heap earlier. How did that passion for sport, I guess, help drive your design career?
Yeah, so I mean, anyone who's watched The Last Dance, 20, 30 years later. But really, I was living that as a 11, 12-year-old kid in Newcastle. Early 90s, and I just fell in love with basketball and MJ and the Bulls and a few other key players. And yeah, one thing that was central to that basketball culture was sneakers.
And is that something that you noticed, even watching games early on, that the interest for you was perhaps not on the number of rebounds that were taken in a game, but that you were really drawn to watching, the sneakers and the kit that these guys were playing in?
Yeah, sure. And I played the game as well. Like I started out playing soccer when I was younger, and then when basketball took over the world, I switched over. And I was interested in it from a performance point of view, but at the same time, I'm looking at what they're wearing and wanting to wear the same stuff and wanting to create my own. So yeah, that's where the passion.
When do you reckon you realized, when do you reckon it clicked that, you could actually do that as a career?
Not until almost the end of university. So when I was going through high school, I was good at maths and science, like physics and chemistry, but I was also really into art. So I had that creative side. And I was kind of being steered more towards a career in like engineering or something like that, where physics and stuff came into play. It wasn't until I was choosing my subjects at the end of year 10 and then going into university trying to choose a course that I discovered that I was also interested in car design. I sketched cars discipline. So yeah, that's kind of when I figured out that was the right fit. And it wasn't until the end of uni that I really discovered that footwear design is actually an industrial design discipline.
Which is a funny link to have made, and not one that I had made before hearing it from you. If you're just jumping on board and you're joining us on HSC and Beyond, awesome to have your company. I'm Neve. This is Tim. Tim's a sneaker designer. He worked for Nike and for Quicksilver for over 10 years. And we're having a little bit of a yarn about how he got there and his career path. It's all part of our Terminal X program. We're going to tell you a little bit more about that later on as well. But you can jump online, jump on over to TX now and join our Terminal X community. You've mentioned a couple of things there about high school and about the subjects that you chose, what you did for your HSC. I want to know how that kind of worked into your university preferences and those subjects that you studied in your final years of high school, because you had a pretty unusual mix.
Yeah, I did. Like I said, I did the things that I was good at and a couple of things that interested me. Like in the end, I chose some of the sciences over things like music and design and technology subjects, which, there's more just lies. So, but it's kind of interesting that making those choices kind of led. In the end, I actually had visual communication, which is graphic design as my first preference, but I missed out on the marks by by like half a mark, and ended up getting into industrial design, based on the mark I got, which was pretty lucky in the end.
So what was that experience like at the time in terms of having to pivot to our new favorite buzzword these days, but change your plans slightly from perhaps where you hoped you'd be?
Yeah, well, I think for me, graphic design is still something I'm really interested in, and I do all the time. I design a lot of logos. I apply graphics to all of my products. It's part of the presentation skills you need as an industrial designer as well. But I think it was just kind of fashionable at the time, so that's where I was kind of heading. As I said, I was really lucky that I missed out on the marks and ended up doing the course that was right for me. I think I would have found my way there eventually. You know, if you're passionate about something, you'll find a way to get to it. And I don't think you need to get too worried about your choices along the way.
We mentioned UTS off the top and the fact that they were here on HSC and Beyond just before we dropped in, which is a pretty awesome coincidence.
Yeah.
You headed to UTS straight after high school. You've said there that you studied industrial design. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that course itself, Tim, and how important it was, I guess, in shaping the options that you had career-wise later.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at heading into design at university, there's basically like 4 disciplines. There's architecture, graphics, fashion, and then there's industrial design. So for people who haven't heard the term before, industrial design can be a little bit confusing. It kind of sounds like you're designing like big machines or something. But basically industrial design is product design. So, you know, any 3-dimensional product that's not a building generally falls under industrial design. And I really found that, you know, that course in particular makes very versatile graduates. So we ended up in graphic design fields, some ended up being product designers. And you know, what is the line between fashion and product design? Because, you know, I'm designing wearable objects basically.
Did you find that once you started that degree, you kind of realized the wealth of options that existed within it that maybe you didn't know beforehand?
So I hadn't thought about, you know, the chance to do different electives and subjects in, you know, like I did automotive design, some people did furniture design, but you know, a company like Sunbeam might come experience all the different parts of that industry.
We are, Lou. We did lose you just a little bit there in the midst of that answer, Tim. So I'll just ask you another one in case people listening at home missed a little bit of that as well, because there are so many different options within that industrial design course. You've gone back to UTS since, and since having a pretty awesome career overseas, and you've been teaching that course as well. Can you guide us, I guess, a little bit through what industrial design can lead to, the options that it can lead to career-wise?
Yeah, so what I was explaining is the you know, the versatility of the graduates, and you know, a lot of people I went through with have gone into different areas of design, whether it's graphic or fashion or straight up product design. And you know, my discipline, which is a combination of fashion and product design, you know, that's a whole different world that I didn't know about at the beginning of the course. I thought it was just like computers and furniture and phones and things like that. But yeah, it makes a very versatile graduate who has a really deep knowledge of graphics. You know, you can do electives in marketing, you could do electives in you know, furniture design, whatever you want to do.
You can actually see Tim's step-by-step sneaker sketching flow on our Terminal X website, and it is awesome. It blew my mind when I watched it the other day. You'll also be able to ask him questions directly over at Slack as soon as we wrap up here. So if you've missed any of that, if there's any of that you want to dig into a little bit deeper, head on over to Terminal X online. You can register there. You'll get a link to our Slack channel, and that's where Tim will be as soon as we wrap up this conversation here at HSC and Beyond. You can also win a pretty cool pair of Nike Kicks. All you've got to do to be in the draw is upload a picture of your favorite sneakers on our Slack channel, which is Kicks Design with Tim. So make sure you get on board with that. Tim, when you look back at what I guess was your first big break, something that really launched your career, how did it play out?
Kind of by accident. And, you know, it's a happy accident, and it comes through, you know, hard work and being good at what you do. But I guess the big break for me was a friend from university who's a surfer got a job at Quicksilver. He was designing wetsuits. and he just let me know about a job that they had going at their headquarters in Torquay in Victoria at the start of the Great Ocean Road, right near Bells Beach. He said they
It's
had
an
a job
awesome
in,
location to be.
yeah, he said they had a job as a bag designer there, and I had never designed a bag before in my life, but I applied and I got in there as a junior designer, and I guess that was the start of my career.
You would have learned a heap very quickly. What kind of challenges did you experience as a guy in your early 20s who's just relocated and started his professional life in an area that perhaps was a bit of a surprise even to you?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that got me over the line in the interview is the fact that I'd done a lot of snowboarding, and they're an action sports company, so I was designing for sports that I knew, like I understand the sports and the culture. But yeah, it was a big move at the time. I had actually spent a year traveling, so living away from home wasn't too big a stretch for me. But I learned a lot from my first boss at Quicksilver. He was amazing, just kind of teaching me, all the technical side of bag design. And I really just spent the first year becoming an expert in how to make bags. And I think that's one of the most valuable things you can do, is just absorb as much as you can from the people around you. Just be a sponge and soak it all up.
And ultimately, that first gig really led to your dream job, I guess. Tell us about the day that Nike came knocking.
Yeah, so for those who don't have a LinkedIn account yet, I highly recommend it. It's a tool that has got me a lot of work over the years. And initially, not long after signing up to LinkedIn, I was contacted by a recruiter at Nike over in Portland, Oregon, who said they had a job going in bag design there. So that was my foot in the door, no pun intended, into Nike. And so, yeah, I moved over to Portland with my wife and started my career there.
Some awesome lessons in that, in terms of keeping those social media platforms up to date and representative of what you can do, right? So you moved to the States, which ultimately is not a bad place to be for an MBA lover. Was
Mhm.
that a pretty steep learning curve in itself?
It was. I mean, being in America wasn't difficult. I traveled there quite a lot. We get so much of American culture here. It's almost like home when you get there. But the learning curve was working at a company the size of Nike. It's just a behemoth. It's 10,000 people on campus. It's like a university in itself. And I think there's 600-700 designers alone when I started working at Nike. So yeah, the learning curve was around figuring out how you fit into a company of that size.
It would have been an unreal place to be. The vibe, I imagine, would have been incredible. What would a day in the life look like back then?
Um, it's interesting. It is really big, but I worked within a fairly tight knit team, and we were in. I mean, there's so many buildings that make up the Nike campus, and kind of a remote one off to the side. And this is when I started in bags. So my day to day wasn't that different to what it had been like at Quicksilver. It was a pretty similar kind of size team and a fairly relaxed working environment. What was different was the company, the number of people that had an opinion about your product. But the day to day, I'd turn up at 9 o'clock. I'd do my job and I'd go home at 5, and it was pretty relaxed for the most part.
How does that go feedback wise? Because you would invest so much of yourself in what you're producing and in the designs that you're creating. So how hard is it then to remove the ego a little bit when you're getting that not always positive, I imagine, feedback?
Yeah, that was probably the toughest thing. Trying to drop the ego. When things can be products can be cut based on business decisions, like that. And it's nothing personal, but it's hard not to take it personally when you've put so much work into something. So yeah, trying not to let those decisions hurt your ego is a big part of it. And then just moving on to the next product, the next design, focusing your energy on what you can change, not what you can't.
What's that time frame like from the time that a brief lands on your desk to the time that we see LeBron running out on court in your sneakers?
It's long. It's really long. The design part is fairly quick. I mean, we might be working on the initial concept for about 6 weeks or so. Then you start moving into prototyping. That process might take a few months. But from when you first receive the brief to when someone can actually buy that product in a store can be around 18 months.
What was the buzz like for you, especially in those early days? And maybe it never changed, but when you saw your sneakers being worn by guys in the NBA or even just by some random who walked past you in the street, I imagine that must have been an unreal feeling.
It is. It's one of the coolest and strangest parts of working for a company that size. And I think the seeing the random person on the street when you're, in somewhere in Europe, like that person went out and spent their money on something that you designed, and it's a pretty cool and pretty humbling feeling.
Do you ever tap anyone on the shoulder and say, "Hey mate, I made your shoes"?
Not on the street. Sometimes I'd hang around the footwear wall in say a Foot Locker or something, like in a store, and I'd look at my shoe, and the store attendant might come up and ask me if I want to try them on. That's okay. I designed it.
Yeah, I made that, mate. Where do you get your inspiration? Because ultimately you're always trying to create something new, something different. Where are you looking for that inspiration?
Yeah, well, obviously the internet is a huge part of it now more than ever. But before we couldn't venture out too far. Travel's the biggest thing for me in terms of finding inspiration. And I've been very fortunate in my career at both Quicksilver and at Nike that I've been able to do a lot of international travel, purely focused on research and inspiration.
You've worked with some massive names, and I've mentioned a couple throughout our chat today, but those are guys that are seriously driven. They're at the top of their fields. They're in a performance environment that has massive expectations. Mm-hmm. Does working in that kind of space help keep you pumped?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Aside from the travel, which, you come back from a big trip and you're all energized, but when you hear that, LeBron James is on campus, Roger Federer is on campus, and he's going to be in the quad outside the cafeteria, and like that kind of stuff just gets everyone so excited about the company that they work for, and they go back to their desks feeling better about themselves, feeling better about, where they work. So yeah, the energy on the Nike campuses is always pretty high.
I was checking out some of your work on the Terminal X website, and there's half a dozen different pictures of Roger Federer with a bag that you designed in a number of different colors on a number of different occasions, all of them Grand Slams. Mm-hmm. What is it like for you as a designer to see someone who obviously has a huge number of options at their fingertips attach themselves and really clearly love what it is that you've created?
Yeah, that was that kind of happened by chance as well. We weren't designing a bag specifically for Roger, but one of my colleagues took a whole bunch of duffel bags that we had to him, to see if there was something we could use as a basis for the bag he would take on court. And he happened to pick this bag that I designed, which was actually designed for soccer originally. But he loved it. He told us what modifications he wanted to make to it. He wanted it a little bigger. He wanted a few more compartments inside to separate items. And yeah, that became Roger's bag for the best part of 3 years. Every tournament that he played and every major, that bag went out with him.
That is not a bad tick of approval at all. If you're just joining us on HSC and Beyond, my name's Neve. This is Tim Ford. He's a sneaker designer and also a Terminal X creator. And it's going to be awesome right across this week to be able to introduce you to a heap of our Terminal X creators who have all carved out really awesome careers in their own right. Tim, we've talked a bit about where you get your inspiration. What about tips and advice for people who are tuning in today? Are there super important skills that people can start working on now that will ultimately hold them in really good stead in the long run?
Yeah, one thing I generally put a lot of emphasis on is sketching, and that's what I went back to UTS to help teach. So the subject was called Professional Communication, and it's really about helping students express their ideas, communicate, what's in their head, and get it out onto paper and onto the screen to communicate to their clients or to their lecturers. It's not an essential tool, but to me, sketching is, as an industrial designer, that's our language, right? As a journalist, you use words. As a designer, I use images, and that's how I get what's going on in my head and kind of translate it to people. So yeah, I think you don't have to have the best sketching skills in the world. At the end of the day, it's a tool. It's a communication tool that helps you communicate ideas.
Are there plenty of programs that can help you refine those skills these days? Because as you say, I focus on the spoken word primarily. My drawing skills are worse than my 4-year-old daughter's drawing skills. So I feel like that would be a real fear for me to take on, even if I had creative ideas in that space.
Yeah, there's definitely tools out there, digital tools. So part of the coursework that I taught was digital sketching. So for people who don't necessarily have the best sketching skills, having that undo command, like being able to hit Command Z on a line that's not quite right is a huge plus. So there's awesome software out there, like Sketchbook Pro is one that I use. And whenever I'm doing presentation sketches, and you can see them in my portfolio and on my Instagram, most of those are done digitally. I still sketch on it with a pen and paper when I'm just, trying to get those ideas quickly out of my head. But when I'm doing something a little fancier, I'll generally do it digital.
We can watch your flow on Terminal X, literally see you do that from the start to the end of a sneaker design process. These days, having done it for so many years, do you just get in the zone with it and it comes very naturally?
It is very natural. And part of the most unnatural part when you start out is working with a tablet. So you're sketching kind of on a little tablet. You're not sketching directly onto the paper, but the cursor is up on the screen there. So there's like a disconnection between your hand and what's actually happening. So getting used to that can take quite a while. But now I don't even notice that I'm drawing down here and the image is appearing up on the screen there. It's just, it's a lot more symbiotic the more you do it.
Which is so cool for us to be able to watch and really tune into as well. Unfortunately, we're nearly out of time here on HSC and beyond, but Tim is going to stick around on our Slack channel. He can answer your questions directly over there as soon as we wrap up here. So if you haven't already, head over to Terminal X. You can sign up. It's free. You'll get an email link to our Slack channel, and that's where you can chat with Tim. All you need to do to be in the running for that new pair of Nike kicks that I mentioned earlier is to jump onto our TX Slack channel. You need to upload a picture of your favorite kicks, and Tim will be able to have a yarn with you over there as well. There's so much on Terminal X about that design process, Tim. Do you imagine that, watching other people and watching some of our TXs throw their ideas out there, share with you their favorite kicks as well through the photo competition, does that still spark new ideas for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I follow a lot of people who are just like putting, footwear sketches up, and I'm always like learning new techniques, new little tricks to kind of make my sketches better, make me better at what I do. So yeah, constantly absorbing what other people are doing and learning from others is a huge part still.
You're doing your own thing these days as well. You moved away from that Nike hub. You're back here in Oz, and we're so happy that you are. How hard was that to move away from the safety, I guess, of a behemoth like Nike and launch out on your own?
Not as hard as I thought it would be. And I guess the fact that we were moving home was a big part of that. We wanted to come back and be closer to family. And back to the life we knew, closer to the beach. There's a lifestyle here that you can't have many other places, and that's what we miss most. Becoming an independent designer, that was a little bit scary, but again, I found work quickly through LinkedIn. I kept my profile up to date, got all my latest Nike work on there, which is a good fly trap for people that are looking for a designer. And yeah, I found a lot of work pretty quickly, which was good.
Does it mean these days that you get a more direct connection with the individual or the company that you're designing for? And I guess more kind of creative input from them that you are then working with and incorporating into the design process yourself?
I think the biggest thing for me has been the variety of projects that I work on. So when you're not working for one company, you get a lot of different people with different ideas coming to you to design different types of product. And that's what's kind of helped me grow as a designer more, is the variety of projects. As an independent designer, especially if your client is not a designer themselves or doesn't have that inclination, then there's not a lot of back and forth. You are kind of designing independently, but you kind of use the experience of the other clients that you're working with to help build each client.
We're almost out of time. If you were going to spruik your career choice as an option for the teenagers who are watching today and have some pretty big decisions ahead of them over the next few years, What's your pitch? Give us your pitch, Tim.
My pitch. So this is actually one of my proudest moments, and this is the Nike Kyrie Flytrap in my size. So this is the first time I had an NBA player's shoe that I designed that I could wear while I was playing basketball. So yeah, if that's not enough for anyone who's interested in kicks, then yeah, I don't know what it is.
It's amazing. Too good to wear though, right? It's been raining in Sydney the last week. You're not going to wear those out on the streets, are you? They're too pretty to actually stick on your feet.
I have one to wear and one to keep on ice.
Yeah, wise, a very wise choice. Tim, it has been so awesome meeting you today. Thank you so much for having a chat with us.
My pleasure.
Tim Ford joining us on HSC and Beyond. He is one of our Terminal X creators. A big thank you to all of you guys for tuning in as well. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Best of luck with your own studies, with starting out on your own career journey. If you want to hear more about creating a life you love, about Tim, about his awesome designs, make sure you jump online, join our Terminal X family, head over to our Slack channel. That's exactly where Tim is heading now, and he can answer any other questions that you might have. Take care. Thank you so much. We'll